Baker, and I'll be talking about my time at Toynbee Hall last year as a residential volunteer worker. Toynbee Hall is just a 30-minute walk north of here, but I'll tell you a little bit more about it in the presentation. So, Toynbee Hall is a charity that was established in 1884 in Tower Hamlets. Honestly, you just get out here, go up the street for a little bit, you'll be at the place. It originally began as a university settlement where people would come in during their Oxbridge education and then come in to live in Tower Hamlets and basically learn a little bit about the local area. And then the idea was eventually, they'll go on to Parliament after this or something, and they'll be able to advocate for the people that live in this area compared to maybe the more wealthier or privileged upbringings that would afford you to go to a nice education back at the time. While they were living there, they sort of did work in the area, and they helped out on other projects that they would do, and one of which you might be familiar with is Charles Booth's poverty map. So this is, I think, one of the first instances of basically data being used for public good. And the idea was here is that Charles Booth took a team of people at Toynbee Hall, and they went and they canvassed all of London, which you can sort of see here, and they went door to door collecting data on sort of the state of wealth in the area, and they color-coded it in something that I don't think would necessarily fly today with, if you can sort of see here, the classifications. The lowest ones in black are the lowest class vicious semi-criminal activity going down all the way through poor people going through middle class. So obviously this wouldn't be categorized as today, but it's a really interesting thing to look at, and the London School of Economics actually has a whole part of the website devoted to this, but Toynbee Hall was very sort of, Toynbee Hall served an important role in helping develop these things with the people that were going out and doing this. So 135 years later, the program still sort of exists in a semi-different way, but we have a different sort of demographic as well of people that are coming to be a part of this residential program here. So instead of having a bunch of white dudes hanging out here, we have an Irish storyteller, we have an English artist, a French social justice advocate, and American researcher, along with our very British CEO at Toynbee Hall. And it was a one-year program where you came in and did research. The halls just went under a renovation this past year, and they're looking for it to be used for space. But then I got to live here in the last year of my PhD while I was also hanging out and helping out with research. So I have a bit of a quantitative background, and as a member of this program, I really wanted to say, how can I use basically the tools that I have as a quantitative researcher who uses R to help out in a charity setting, which I hadn't done before because I was mostly hanging out in academic settings. So in this talk, I want to tell you a little bit about how it was sort of used in projects, why that's helpful, if you're interested in getting involved in charity work, how you might be able to go about and do that, as well as a specific event that we had, which was this data-thon, which was in line, we thought would be in line historically with some of the stuff that Charles Booth did on the poverty maps. So before talking about how we necessarily use R on some of the projects, I do want to take a second and talk about what kind of projects we're involved in at Toynbee Hall, and then also sort of what the idea is. So at Toynbee Hall, the research team, led by Dr. Zhao Lin, takes a participatory action research approach to what they want to solve, as opposed to sort of the idea where we have this problem that we want to solve. There are a bunch of older people in the area, and we know they're lonely, so what are we going to do? Let's go to Google Scholar and look in the literature and see what happens there, and then you write a report, and then you hand this report to someone, and no one reads it, and you're like, yes, we've done something. That's not the approach that we advocate for there, but rather the idea is we want to try and solve a problem as we are basically trying to go through the entire project. So if you know instead that there are tons of people who are lonely in the area, what you instead do is sort of harness the local community of older people in the area. You train them in research methods, say, hey, we've got all these questions that we answer. What are important questions to you? They come together as part of this thing. So there's 20 different peer researchers with 2 lead researchers on this older people project that was done. And then they go out into the local area, and not only do they ask people survey questions, say, okay, can you please answer all these things that we're interested in, but we also equip them with tools along the way so that they're able to say, well, we're tackling loneliness. You might be lonely. Why don't you come hang out with us at Toynbee Hall? Why don't you become part of this research team? And then the idea is that we're sort of solving this loneliness problem as we're going in there, as opposed to this sort of more sterile way of thinking about research as sort of the researcher imposing their knowledge on something else. And this sort of becomes relevant in the data-thon, taking the same idea. So basically, there's a couple of different types of projects that we were involved on. Some of them had to do with the needs of older people in Tower Hamlets. Some of them had to do with patterns of savings, opinions of debt advisors. So basically, the idea was, how can you use R to kind of chomp through a data set that they give you, and then how can you basically best convey it to other people. So here's a couple of visualizations, some of the ones that I made while I was there. So one of the nice things about using R, and I obviously don't preach into the choir at this thing, is that you don't. If someone hands you an Excel spreadsheet and it's all sort of all formatted in such a way that it's hard to access it, and they basically come with a pre-prescribed analysis. R will allow you to sort of, if you sit there and chop it up and actually make it in a nice, organized and tidy format, you can chop through data at a much faster rate than what they were doing. So here we were able to basically show on one of our larger surveys different disparities in savings that people have across Great Britain, as well as contrast that with different amounts of income, which wouldn't have been possible the way that it was initially set up, which was quite nice. And then the other thing that we did as a result of being involved with R and then trying to bring that onto the team was have this datathon. So the idea is we thought, okay, well, 135 years ago, everybody came around and tried to sort of put your resources together in order to help people out in London. What is, the 2019 equivalent of that? So we had our first datathon where we essentially took this nice little map, used it as our calling card for data scientists to be in the area. They either come in to the place, or they could do this online via Twitter. And we set up a nice GitHub account and said, hey, we have to get these projects coming up. We have a new one coming out on crime in the area. We have another one on youth homelessness. And is there anybody that has data that they want to crunch? We kind of want to start to position ourselves and be some of the people that could possibly be an area that people would go to help in collaboration with other sort of data for good organizations. So instead of going door to door with between all the different areas in London, we went on the internet and found all these great open data resources, ranging from the Open Data Institute. London has a huge data storehouse, and then Centrepoint, which is also an organization that focuses on youth homelessness, has a lot of data as well that they were able to put forward for this day-to-day. So as a result of it, people would come in, and basically we'd have the expert people who knew about the questions that we wanted to ask, interfacing with some of the data scientists that would want to come in. We were able to sort of chop up, this is an image that was made from the Tower Hamlets area, different areas, and so the idea is say, okay, how can we then use this publicly available data to better inform the reports that we're going to write, and then eventually when we go out and publish these things and share them with the people in the local community, hopefully use these things, sort of going off the Hans Rowling idea that maybe that crime isn't so bad in the area if you're an older person that's concerned with it, or something of that nature. There's another image that I didn't get to add to this because I was a bit late today, but if you go on Twitter, I retweeted it, which is also a map of crime in the area. That's a PhD student came in at the time and says, oh, I just want to use my afternoon and sort of try something new and help some people out. So basically the take-home message here is I had never worked in the charity sector before, or nonprofit if you're an American in that sense, but there's definitely a need and demand, I think, for people with even basic skills in data science or statistics or machine learning or whatever you want to talk about, to basically just make a lot of plots very quickly. You can imagine that a lot of people working in charity are not able to pay the super salaries that you maybe could pay in some sort of enterprise thing. So it's very nice to be able to get involved, to help people out, because what's the sort of no sweat off your back is actually very helpful in these types of situations. So you can follow some of the people that we have on Twitter. I don't know if these slides are going to be made available afterwards, but yeah, that is what we did at Toynbee Hall. And if you'd like to talk about data for good as opposed to what the other things would imply after this conference, please find me at the coffee session. Thank you.